welcome to the No BS Spiritual Book Club's live video series. And join me today to share the stories behind the 10 books that influenced her the most on her life path is book publicist, women's circle facilitator, and skipping enthusiast, Kim Corbin. Kim, welcome and thank you for joining us.
Oh, thank you so much, Sandie. It's a pleasure to be here.
So, as a publicist with New World Library, a publisher that specializes in the mind, body, spirit arena, you clearly have to read a lot of books. And being a publicist, of course, means that you not only get to read a lot of books, but before the public does, but you actually have to promote those books to make sure that other people want to read them. So what I want to know is, have you ever come across a book that you really don't want to promote or don't believe in?
There was a situation at New World Library. New World Library is an equal opportunity publisher that publishes into a lot of different areas. And we did a book on atheism where that I personally, it really didn't resonate with me individually. And luckily New World Library is the kind of place that I can say that. And then, and I really appreciate that that atheism is the way some people choose to navigate their lives, and they have the right to do that. And I love that New World Library published into it and that they respected my personal beliefs and feelings, that I didn't actually have to be the one to publicize it when I spoke up.
Well, that's really good, because most people would think I can't tell them that I don't want to do this book. I mean, I've had that with the odd radio show, where somebody's persuaded me that a guest is going to be brilliant and I don't read the books till the week before. And then I've booked them months out and I read the book and I just throw it across the room and think, what am I going to say?
What have I done?
Yeah, what have I done? And luckily, both times it happened to me, I had been recovering from a cough. So I missed a few shows. So I was able to say, I don't think my voice is going to hold out. Give it to somebody else. Because, you can't. I mean, if you've got any integrity, you can't tend to like something if it just doesn't resonate with you. So I'm really glad that you were able to say that and that they were able to accommodate your feelings. That's really good to hear.
That's one of the New World Library really walks their talk as far as a business and in the world. And so that's one of the reasons I've been there for 15 years and I love it so much.
Wow. You see, this is one of the reasons why we started the book club, is because there are publishers out there that unfortunately are more focused on money than on the books themselves and the material. So at least I know if I get a pitch from Kim, it's going to be worth reading, or at least it's something that Kim thinks is worth reading.
Yes, that gets the skipper seal of approval.
Good. Okay. Okay. You want a little stamp made?
Yeah.
Okay, so let's start talking about your books. And my goodness, the first one, yes, a long time ago since I read that one, Embraced by the Light by Betty Eadie, published in 1992. So you say that this book cracked your heart wide open. Why?
It's a good question. Why? It's funny because I went back, of all the books on my list, when I put it together for you, I went back and tried to reread it, and it just didn't resonate with me for where I am right now, which I thought was really interesting, because when I read it, I couldn't stop crying. Like, it was such an awakening as far as her near-death experience and the way that love was really at the center of everything, and that every life has a purpose. And just for where I was in my life at the time, it was exactly what I needed. And I literally couldn't stop crying after I read it. And I called my dad and told him how moved I was by it. And he had to read the book. And when he read it, it didn't have that effect on him. But it was one of those right place, right time moments where my soul had this tremendous recognition that I was there for more than I had ever realized before, and that really love was what it was all about.
That was a New York Times bestseller, and at the time it was considered a really groundbreaking account of life after death. I think, maybe when you say you go back now, you've been in this arena for a long time, You're not a newbie anymore, and you've probably read other books about life after death. And so this one begins to kind of lose some of the original. I think we begin to lose touch with where we were at that point. Right. So looking back on some of them, we think, oh yeah, you know, I wouldn't put it at the top of my list today, but at the time, you know, it obviously was such an impactful book for you. Absolutely. And therefore, I'm sure it would be for many people just waking up as well.
Absolutely. And it's still, I checked it out on Amazon when I put the book list together, and it's still selling very, very well. So it's lasted the test of time. Yeah. So it was just interesting to me that when I tried to read it again, I couldn't even hardly get through the first chapter. But
did you hop back and have a quick look at all of the books on your list?
Most of them, yeah.
So number 2 then, how did you feel about that one when you went back to revisit it? The Road Less Traveled by M. Scott Peck.
Oh, The Road Less Traveled. That one stands the test of time. And that one really changed my whole life overview and perspective and way that I wanted to live my life. And I can remember I was living in Indiana, and I was in my early 20s when I read it. And it just, I mean, his whole thing about how therapy is a courageous thing to do, and the introspection and choosing to live a life where we're evolving and growing. It just really, like, I was like, yes, I can't wait till I can afford to do therapy. I was so excited. And eventually when I came to California, I was like, oh, I was just really, really into it. And there's such a stigma that it's a negative thing, but it changed everything for me, the book and then the therapy. And it was just like, wow, like, this is a meaningful life. I want to live a meaningful life. And he really set me on the trajectory through that book.
That one was published in 78, and I think I probably picked it up at some point in the 80s. And certainly the first half of the 80s, I was still going through don't know if I totally believe everything that I'm reading, you know, but I'm going with what feels right. And I remember taking from that book something that really stuck with me, and I don't know why, was he was talking about instant gratification and how so many young people today, that's what they're looking for, but what they're missing in that, you know, drive for instant gratification is a bigger picture of what they could be doing and where they could be heading. And for some reason, that phrase did it for me. And I don't remember why it did it for me, but that's the thing that I recall now when I think back on that book. Yeah, a really good one. And you're the first person to pick that book.
Oh, really?
Yeah. We've got quite a few people picking the same books over and over again, but that one's the first. And number 3 in your list, you're the first person to pick this one as well. Succulent Wild Woman by Sark.
Yeah, that, and Sark, as it's turned out, and I's paths have crossed numerous times since that book completely rocked my world. Yeah, The Succulent Wild Woman just gave my creative, artistic spirit permission to just come out and express herself. And I read it shortly before my first Burning Man, and my first Burning Man was where it kind of all came to fruition. You know, I almost didn't go because it was clothing optional, and by the end I was topless and body painted and like, yeah. And I've never, that Succulent Wild Woman has never gone back in her box since then. Like, I love Sark and who she is in the world. And New World Library has gone on to publish. We did a book with her called Succulent Wild Love, and then we did also did Glad No Matter What. And when I started the skipping movement, I reached out to her and I told her what I was up to, and she was so encouraging and gave me a endorsement quote. And so I feel like she's a kindred spirit, 100%, and she's become a dear friend over the years. And I'm really grateful for her presence and her books and her just colorful, bright spirit.
Do you often come across somebody whose work you really like, not published by New World Library, and then you go to them and say, please publish their next book?
Not too much. I kind of keep a separation with church and state of the the editorial committee, and And I like it that way, because it also goes the opposite way, where someone who I really like, who writes a book, and then they're like, oh, you can help me get it published. And it's kind of like, no, like I'm working on my own book that hasn't been accepted by New World Library. So yet it isn't there yet. So I like to kind of have a little separation between editorial and marketing.
Yeah, that's a good idea. So number 4, The Dance of the Dissident Daughter by Sue Monk Kidd, published in 1996. When you first sent that in to me, I thought, I have to have a look at that one. Haven't had a chance yet, but it sounds really interesting. Tell us, what were you doing at the time you read that, and how did it impact you?
I was living in San Francisco at the time that I read it, and I had recently started attending Glide Memorial Church, which really shifted my relationship with religion and spirituality in a major way. And this book, you know, because she's writing about Christianity and then blending it with feminine spirituality and bringing the feminine into Christianity. And so it helped me bridge like a lot of the things that I loved about Christianity when I was being raised. There were some things, you know, that didn't totally resonate with me. Like I wondered if in our middle class church, if a homeless person stumbled in and sat in the front row, would they be welcome, or would everyone just be shocked? Like I kind of saw that early on. And then when I landed at Glide, it was a place where homeless, like you're sitting with a homeless person on one side of you and a Marin socialite on the other side of you, and you're holding hands and you're hugging. And so I saw that, not that my churches in Indiana, you know, weren't doing like a great place for a lot of people to be, but for me, there was something that was missing in there. And when I read this book about her bringing the feminine into a lot of the things that she loved about Christianity, it deepened my relationship with Christianity, and then empowered the feminine in me, which is a huge, something I continue to develop and want to have more of in my life.
Was she one of the first? I was reading a bit about her, and it said that she was a conventionally religious woman, and then in the late 80s she experienced an unexpected awakening, and that began her journey toward a feminine spirituality.
Yes.
Do you think she was one of the, you know, the pioneers?
Oh, I think, yeah. I think she's the only one that I've found that really writes about it as well as she does. And there might be, I'm sure there probably are others, but you know, she's such a well-known author too, and she was really steeped in that tradition and then brought the feminine into it in a really cool way.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think there's a few actually doing it now. I recently interviewed Megan Watterson, and she was writing about Mary Magdalene and the Magdalene Gospels.
Yeah, Mary Magdalene.
How that fit in with, you know, with the religion that she knew, that she says she knew within her, but actually didn't show up in her church. And it really upset her that it didn't show up in her church, because there was no room for women in that religion that she experienced at her church. But yeah, this is a fascinating beginning. I'll have to read this one.
It's a good one.
So number 5, and this is one that you talk about how it, you know, it helped you decide that you were going to live large, go for your dream, and really start the skipping movement. And that's Greg Levoy's book, Callings, Finding and Following an Authentic Life. So tell us about that one. This
is my number 1, if I had to pick of all of them. And I sent him your list after it came out, and I made sure he knew that. It's just the most comprehensive book ever about saying yes to a calling and all that goes with it. And there's so many examples, and it talks about how there's the dark night of the soul is part of the calling, and how, you know, it just really gives context for everything that I was going through with my skipping dream and my skipping calling. It's like it was like my Bible. It was just, it's so many underlines, and it's just, I treasure him and his work so much.
Does he say anything about how to recognize that, you know, whatever it is you're thinking or dreaming about is a calling?
Yeah, the different ways that our callings come into us. There's the whole chapter on that. Yeah.
Okay, well, tell us then, since we're talking about skipping now, how did that come into your life?
It came into my life through a couple of synchronicities. The first time I skipped as an adult was 2 years before I actually started the skipping movement. And I was out with a couple of friends, and one of them said, let's skip, and went skipping down the street. And as I did it, I had a whole download of the vision. Like, oh my gosh, this is so much fun. I could get my Burning Man friends to skip with me and do publicity around it. And then once it's on the media, people will start skipping, and it'll become a skipping movement. But I wasn't ready yet to say yes to my calling, but it came through very clear. And I even tried to recruit my friend Megan to be the skipper, and I would be her publicist. That's how like not ready I was to say yes. And it's interesting, I learned through Greg's book that it's very, very common when people find their callings that we say no to it at first. And so I think that's really important for people to think about for their own callings. Like, what is something that's come up a couple of times that, you know, maybe you just kind of, that's not for me or whatever. Maybe it really is for you. So then 2 years later, I was really searching for how I wanted to, I was in my early 30s, and I was like, I want to make a difference in the world. And I started walking a labyrinth and really just putting that question out there. And then, where I tried to go for a run one day, and it was horrible. And then my coworker told me a story. When I told her about my run, she told me about a story where someone had asked her daughter had asked her to skip with her at the mall. And she said, and I took her by the hand and I did it, but I thought adults don't skip. And as soon as she said that, it was like the light bulb went off again. It was 1999, and my brother helped me create a website. And then it's like the whole vision that I'd had 2 years before came to fruition in a so much bigger way. Like, I recruited head skippers in 70 cities, and there was all the national media started calling me, and I was in fitness magazines, and it worked. I mean, it was what I saw 2 years before completely came to fruition, and then some.
Well, I had a quick look at your website today, and I see that there's a little piece there about the science, skipping versus running. So
Yeah.
tell us what that is about.
That just recently happened. Some people from East Carolina University contacted me, and a guy had started skipping himself. And so they studied if people were skipping and running at the same speed, which is fast skipping. I mean, like, I don't skip that fast. For me, a good skip is like how much fun you have from point A to point B. But these people are like skipping fast on a treadmill. And when you do that, skipping burns more calories than running does. It has less impact on your joints than running does. So physically, it's just really a very valid exercise.
Can you skip on a treadmill?
Yes, but I don't recommend it for people who haven't skipped since they were a kid. Like, skip on the ground first.
Yeah.
But the best way to do it is just like have it be at a fast walking speed, and then just like skip 2 steps and then walk, and then skip 2 steps, and to get used to it. But then once you get it, it's so much fun at the gym to have serious runners on either side of you, and to just be like, la, 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 skipping your little heart out. It's really fun.
Well, there's something so beautifully childlike, you know, that even the thought of it just brings a smile to your face.
Yes. Yeah. And it activates that childlike spirit, which holds the key to so many things that make life wonderful. I mean, our curiosity, our wonder, our imagination, all of these things that we have so often lose touch with as we become adults and life becomes serious and everything becomes heavy. And it's like, we really need to pull on that to really enjoy our lives. I mean, life's really short, and it's supposed to be enjoyable and fun and magical. It can be, but we have to choose to reconnect with that part of ourselves.
Well, I've got some more questions on skipping, but we'll come to those at the end, and maybe a few other people will have some as well. For now, let's just move on to book number 6. Now, this is one of those that comes up again and again and again. And I think everybody who's read it knows why. The 4 Agreements by Don Miguel Ruiz.
Yeah, good one.
So tell us about your experience with that book.
It just really, you know, so especially the don't take things personally agreement was really just groundbreaking for me, and I come back to it time and time again. And when I met my husband, we just got married last June, but when I met him 17 years ago, he also had really impacted his life. And so early in our relationship, we talked about like those 4 agreements were at the core of our relationship, that we were going to use them to navigate our relationship. And so then when we got married, I used them in my vows. When I wrote my vows, I vowed those things, and I love all of them. And I love how the always do your best one like saves you from, because you're not going to do it perfectly, but always doing your best to not take things personally and be impeccable with your word. And what's the other one?
Oh, don't make assumptions.
Yes.
That's my sin.
Yeah.
That's my sin. That's the one that I keep trying, to.
Yeah. And then just always doing our best.
Yeah. Have you told Don Miguel that you?
No, I've never. My paths have never crossed with him. I do know some people from his publisher, but I haven't personally had any connection with him over the years.
I'm sure he'd be delighted to know that they were part of your vows. And I think that's a beautiful way to start a marriage or any relationship, to say this is how we're going to navigate it. I mean, you probably couldn't give better advice to any couple.
Yeah.
So the book will make a great wedding present.
Yes.
Yeah. Read this on your honeymoon if you've got time. So, and number 7 is another one that comes up again and again and again for obvious reasons. The Power of Now by Eckhart Tolle.
Yeah. Well, New World Libraries, our best-selling book by far. That book in these times is just continues. Since I've worked at New World Library, we sell thousands of copies every week, which is very encouraging to me as far as people finding this material and integrating it. When I first read it in like 97 or so, it really, I really understood the watching the thinker and really observing what's going on in our mind from a place of awareness. I got that right away. But then my ego thought I had it all figured out really quickly. I was like, oh, I got this, no problem. And now it's only many, many, many years later that I realize how challenging it truly is to really just be in the moment, and how tricky the ego can be of latching on to different things or feeling like you have it all figured out, which is what I did with The Power of Now early on. But it's just a groundbreaking book, and an author who is really, truly, is what he says that he is and walks his talk. And when Paris Hilton got arrested many years ago, there was a picture of her that came out of her leaving the Bodhi tree holding a copy of The Power of Now. And she read it when she was in there, and so CBS This Morning contacted us and like, we need to talk to Eckhart. And most authors would be, chomping at the bit to be at CBS This Morning. And he was meditating out in the woods and like didn't get back to us for a day and a half, because that's just Eckhart. He's not swept up in a lot of the things that a lot of other people can be. He's very in the now.
Yeah, I remember reading that book on a plane, and it was actually my bookworm. I think it was about a month or 2 ago, and I tell the story of what was going on in my life at that time. But the thing that I took from it, and the thing that I remind myself again and again, is in this moment, what is missing? And that centers me. Just that phrase alone, because right now, there's nothing. If I stay here, nothing is missing.
Yeah.
So, yeah, a good one. Were you the first people to publish the book, or had he self-published?
It was published in Canada by a company in Canada. And then when New World Library got it, we took it on from there.
Right. Yeah.
And one of my favorite quotes is, to offer no resistance to life is to be in a state of great, I'm not going to say it exactly right, but grace, effortlessness, and ease. Like, so much of our discomfort is around our resistance to what is. And if we can just accept what is, then, and stop fighting against it, then we start settling into the now, and then we can find the peace that we seek. Yeah.
Let go of our expectations, eh? Yeah. So number 8, Praying Dangerously, Radical Reliance on God by Regina Sarah Ryan, 2001.
Yeah, this one is, I discovered this book through Glide Memorial Church. I was a part of a women's prayer group that Karen Yunker, who was a minister there, introduced us to the book and the concept. And the idea of praying dangerously is that you aren't praying like, oh, please heal my friend, please give me this. You know, it's really, the prayer is, have your way with me. Melt me, mold me, fill me. Like, it's really like, come in and which is a dangerous prayer, because when we do that, it really will take away all of the things that our ego likes to hold on to. So really, just like your will, thy will be done is really the prayer. And then just having the grace to accept whatever it is that comes in from that place. It completely transformed my prayer life. And that group, we would get together and we would share what was going on with with a partner, and then we would pray dangerously for each other, and not, you know, not go into the, oh, please heal that person. Like, whatever is the highest good for all is what we're praying for, and it's dangerous.
Are you still facilitating women's circles?
I am right now. I'm leading a women's circle called Vision 2020 that we started. It's such divine timing. It started in January, and we had one here in my hometown. We had one meeting in January, one meeting in February, and then the shelter in place started. And so we had rooted together in person enough that now we're doing them on Zoom, and they've just become a lifeline for me to have that circle of women in my community to come into and process and talk about how things are going. And it's been pretty amazing.
You know, women's circles are really becoming popular, and I don't mean to denigrate them by using that word, but we're hearing more and more women are daring to start them and to attend them. And it's as if it's you know, I was talking to a friend of mine who's an author. In fact, he was our guest a couple of weeks ago, and he's starting. His latest book is about Princess Diana, because he was her personal presentation coach for the last 2 years of her life, and he's trying to start Diana heart circles, because he says that, you know, women don't have the sewing bees, and they don't have the you know, the different ways that they used to get together in the old days, and they'd all sit there sewing, and they'd be chatting and sharing whatever they needed to share at the time. And we need to have that opportunity to come together in community. So he's doing it around some of Diana's work, and that he was privileged to know about when he was working with her. So I think that's wonderful. I think we need a lot more of them.
It's amazing what happens when a circle of women come together with the intention of just sharing openly what's in our hearts. It's the mirroring that happens. Like, you hear something in every woman's story that you can connect with, and inevitably it happens every time. And it's not facilitating women's circles is easy. It's just like holding the space and creating you know, something to guide it, and then the feminine energy and the women and the wisdom of the group just fill it up every single time. And it's been many years since I have had a regular women's circle in my life, and I'm so grateful that I have one right now.
Is yours a weekly or monthly circle?
Monthly. We've just been doing once a month. Yeah.
Yeah. Keep going. You could do skipping end the circle.
Well, actually, that's the thing that's really fun thing that's been happening in the pandemic. I have a friend in New York, Michelle Joni, who leads Michelle Joni's skipping club. And I never been able to attend her skips because she's in New York. And so because of the pandemic, she's been doing them online. And so on Thursdays, I missed today because I had to skip today because it was at 11. But so basically everyone gets on and is in their respective space, and then we skip to a song and then do a little sharing after. So it is a bit of a skipping circle, but men are allowed to.
Cool.
Yeah.
Number 9. I remember this one. Excuse me, your life is waiting. The Astonishing Power of Positive Feelings by Lynn Grabhorn.
Yeah.
2000 that was published. Was it published by New World Library?
No, I found that one separate. I wasn't at New World Library when I read it. And it really also Abraham Hicks and their audios and their tapes about the law of attraction that kind of go hand in hand with this book for me. It really just reiterated what I had learned through them quite a bit and helped me realize how positivity and skipping is largely that. I think it was that positive energy and vibration was a huge fuel for why the skipping movement was what it was. It's just like it was contagious. And then when I was in that energy more myself, it translated into other parts of my life. And so yeah, it's just that one was, and it's really interesting. At the end of that, she basically says, I'm transitioning to the next dimension and won't be answering any emails or something, and then left. And I think she died a few years later, but she just she didn't, kind of like Eckhart, she didn't want to do the whole author ego thing and just wrote that book. And then
that was it.
Yeah.
And of course, after that, we had The Secret, and then that opened the door to many, many, many more. Do you feel that this is, maybe I shouldn't be asking you this as a publicist, do you feel that this is a better book than The Secret?
Yes. I mean, and then The Secret, we didn't publish The Secret, or be involved with the film, but I think The Secret was great. And I think the challenge with all of the law of attraction stuff that doesn't necessarily get presenced enough is that just because you're thinking positive thoughts and putting positive vibrations out there, it doesn't mean that your things that are in your subconscious aren't going to manifest too, like that your shadow needs to be integrated in that. And I think The Secret made it didn't focus on that quite enough. As far as that, it's not just faking it till you make it and putting a positive energy, like that works for a while, but the stuff that's underneath needs to be dealt with and processed eventually too, or it comes out in weird ways. And so I feel like The Secret kind of glossed over that piece of it. And I think it's a very important piece of it.
Yeah, I agree. And I think it made it sound too easy. And the great thing it did was it really went mainstream. And so many people kind of woke up because of that. But I think there's a percentage of them that also got very disappointed and jaded when what they thought would happen didn't. It's a bit like when 10th Insight and those books came out. Suddenly you were seeing people sitting by swimming pools, opening up, that particular book. And people that you never thought might read a spiritual book were suddenly reading it. So I think those books have their place. But yeah, they need to go a little bit deeper, I think.
Yeah, it's a start for people. And then okay, there's a lot, and you figure it out in your own experience. I mean, my skipping experience was very much like that. Early on, it was just like, I was all in the positive vibrations, and I had lots of insecurities that I was skipping past that. In the long tail of it, you can't skip past it. Well, you can try to, but to really live an integrated, deep spiritual life, you have to be able to bring that into it too, your insecurities and the things that need to be healed, and that it comes eventually. So at least The Secret will start people off on their journey.
So maybe there's a book for you to write, using skipping as a metaphor.
Oh yeah, I've been working on a book for a long time
about skipping.
Yeah. It's definitely the thing I've struggled with the most in my life. Like, I really thought early on in the skipping movement, I had an agent because I was getting so much national publicity, and I did write my story all out, but I haven't been at the place where I can write it in a way that's meaningful to other people, which is the only reason I really want to write it. So I just recently stepped back into the arena again, and I'm in a writing group, and I'm writing every day and continue to move in that direction. But it's been a long time coming, and hopefully eventually it will come to fruition.
Good. Number 10, The War of Art by Stephen Pressfield, 2002.
Yeah, that's a perfect transition, actually, because the War of Art is all about the resistance that comes up when we try to bring our creative energy and art into the world, and how that resistance is a natural part of the experience. And that book is brilliant. I read it a while ago, and then I listened to it on audio recently, and it just, if you're working on anything that you are feeling stuck with, it's so wonderful. And so much of it, which is why I'm glad I'm in this writing group now, is showing up every day. And maybe that's just, you show up and you sit with your resistance, but bringing that, what you want to bring forward into the world every day, showing up is the key to having the creative breakthroughs. And he writes about it in such a beautiful way. I'm sure that's been on a lot of other people's lists as well.
Actually, not so far. You're the first one. You're the first
really?
one. Yeah. So 2002, that was after you started the skipping, wasn't it?
Yes.
So it wasn't, this didn't, impel you towards it. It was helping you continue, I imagine, because it was confirming that you were on the right track.
This one actually it came into my life later. This one is this is my current. This isn't something this is like what right now, this is my learning and growing edge right now, is believing that I can write my book again, and knowing that's something that wants to come through me, and having 20 years worth of resistance built up. And how do I skip with that? How do I move through that? How do I bring forward what I want to bring forward, despite the fact that there is some really well-entrenched resistance there? So even though it was published then, it's fresh for me right now.
So you talked about, feeling that resistance when the idea of skipping first came to you, and you said that this is actually quite normal. When you find your purpose, you will often shy away from it. So does he talk about how to move through that? Does he talk about resistance as being something a little bit bigger than what we think it is?
This book is more practical. His isn't necessarily that it's your calling that you're saying yes to or not. It's more immediate that he originally wrote the book for writers specifically. So it's really about a specific, kind of a little bit more grounded in the moment versus the bigger picture. Like, is this my calling or not? Or am I going to say yes to it? It's like kind of like boots on the ground. This is something I want to do, and I'm hitting resistance, and how do I move through that?
So is it a bit of a writer's block aid?
Yes, a really, really good one.
Yeah. Do you know many writers? Do you recommend it to some of the authors that come to New World Library?
Well, by the time they get to me, they've already written it.
They've done it.
Yeah.
Yeah. Mm. So you said earlier you gave away, normally I ask people once we've gone through their books, so okay, if you had somebody that you cared for who said, hey, I'm ready to step on this path, where shall I start? Which of your books would you recommend? And I think you've already told us, haven't you?
Well,
one book.
I would say The Road Less Traveled, actually, even though Callings is my favorite for me personally. I feel like The Road Less Traveled, because it's such it's a systemic view of how you look and approach your life, that everything else can come in from that. But if you don't have that overarching idea of you're here to forge your own path and to do what's yours to do and to learn the lessons that you're meant to learn, then you need that first. So I'd say The Road Less Traveled.
Okay. So that would be your number one giveaway book.
Yes.
Okay. So a couple of things we normally ask our guests about, and that is the keywords that we ask you to give us, and we put at the top of your page. And these, most people will always put something down that's biographical. But I like to have those little quirky pieces that give us an insight into who you really are, the Kim that her friends know. And you put down, apart from skipping enthusiast, you put down unicorn. So tell us, what is unicorn? What does that mean for you?
Well, I identify as a unicorn, actually. I love the magic of unicorns and the uniqueness of unicorns. I have a unicorner in my room, in my girl room, where whenever I have a bad day or I'm stressed out, I go and I lay in a pile of unicorns and it makes me feel better. At our wedding, we had a unicorn theme and we handed out unicorn horns to everyone, and everyone at the reception became unicorns. It just really represents magic and uniqueness and you just, the joy of life. It's similar to skipping, and it's also kind of, and bubbles are similar. It's like I just bought a bubble machine, and I was having a bad day the other day, and I'm like, I'm going to go out and listen to music and turn on the bubble machine on the porch, and I felt instantly better. So unicorns are that to me. They comfort me, and then I love just being unique and wearing a unicorn horn, like whenever I'm so inspired.
I love that. I mean, this is the child that we often leave behind or suppress because we think, it's no longer appropriate when we reach a certain age. But I love the fact that you have never let go of that.
Well, in a way, I did lose touch with it for a while, and then through the skipping experience, it's a muscle that's gotten developed, and it's gotten bigger. I mean, I guess that my personality always has been that way to some extent. Maybe I just didn't realize it, but it's a muscle that we can develop, and we can choose to amplify it. And so much we worry so much about what other people think of us, and once I realized that, what joy and positivity and that energy is what makes my life have meaning. Like I like to bring it in as many fun ways as I can.
And your husband supports it all?
Oh, he's great. Yes. Yeah.
Does he wear a unicorn horn?
He's been known to. He doesn't identify as a unicorn, but he's very supportive of my unicorn ways. Although he likes to say, Kim, you do not have to buy all the unicorns, because I was going on a little bit of a unicorn buying spree there, and so
yeah,
he sometimes puts down his foot.
So we have you to blame for all the unicorns that appear in all the stores now.
Well, it's kind of in the collective consciousness. It's interesting. There's a whole, it's a movement. There's a lot of unicorns out there.
I have to tell you, years and years and years ago, when my children were small, I wrote a story for them, and unicorns, well, they didn't exist in those days. Nobody wanted to talk about them, but mine was all about a little Pollyanna kind of unicorn who comes to the jungle and brings peace to the jungle. So yeah, I get it.
Yeah,
I do get it. Okay, so I want to go back to skipping a little bit. What has changed in the skipping arena since you started? You said that you've now got so many, what do you call them, captains?
Oh, well, the head skippers were early on. So
Yeah.
that was when I basically quit my job and I was just doing it full time, and social media didn't exist yet. So it was very early social media networking with people who love to skip around the country. So that really isn't as it's not happening anymore like it did. And so what I do now through iSkip, because my day job at New World Library is such a big focus of my life as well, but I still have my skipping passion. So when I find out that someone has done something amazing in the skipping realm, I interview them and feature them on iSkip. And there's a documentary that's going to be coming out. They've been working on it for quite a while. What? I'm sorry?
How big is skipping now?
How big is it? It's hard. That's a hard question to answer because I'm not like having a centralized skipping movement where I have tons and tons of people who are connected. But even at the very beginning, there was thousands of people out there who are already skipping. So it's a small but mighty community of people who love to skip. And I honestly, like early on, I thought that it was going to be the whole world was going to be skipping and it was going to be this more mainstream thing. And honestly, I kind of like that it's not that. Like that it really takes a special person to be able to skip down the street, and not everyone just latched onto it, which would have changed it. Like I like that it is a more of a niche kind of thing for people who who understand and are willing to go into that. So that's kind of been my focus more. I'm a much more tempered skipper. I mean, I was skipping around like with megaphones, yelling into megaphones. And now 21 years later, I'm a much more tempered skipper, and I'm a less evangelical skipper. So there's lots of skipping that happens out there just naturally all the time. But as far as it being skippers are independent free spirits, so there's not like this mass of people that necessarily do it all together.
I'd never heard of it before. I mean, I love the idea of it. It really does bring a smile to my face. Would I do it down the street in central London? Perhaps not. But, you know, certainly down the country lanes where I live. No
yeah,
problem.
and that counts totally. There's also another thing I should have mentioned too, just as far as these kinds of things pop up with skipping. But 5 years ago, I was contacted by a group called Foster Angels of Central Texas, and they had organized this whole event called the Austin Skipathon. It was called the Skipathon, but now it's called the Skip Fest. This year was supposed to be the 5th annual. And basically they had organized this whole event and then realized that they didn't have anyone to lead it. And so they Googled and found me and brought me in to be their skip master of ceremonies. So that's an event where there's like 300 people skipping all together of all ages that happens every year, which is pretty exciting.
That is. And, you know, I'd like to see more kids doing it, because the small ones do it. And then when they get to about 8, 9, 10, you know, they get a bit cool and they don't want to be seen doing it. But I think, you know, it's a feel-good thing. It's going to release all those wonderful hormones.
Absolutely. And and you don't have to do it in public. Like, not everyone's going to be an exhibitionist skipper, but you can just skip 10 steps, and you can do it in your living room and in your house. So I really like to encourage people, just try it. Like, especially if you haven't done it since you were a kid, get out there and skip 10 steps and see how it feels. And if you have a kid in your life, it's such a gift to them to say, you know what, like, have you noticed that adults don't skip? Like, it's been a long time since I've skipped. Can you show me how again? And it's really neat for them to be able to experience and see that too.
Do you skip at work?
Yes. And Mark Allen often skips up and down the halls at work too.
Well, that's good.
Founder. Yeah.
Yeah. Come to work for us and you can skip around all day.
Yeah.
So tell us, before we have to close, what is exciting you now? What are you reading now? Or what are you working on now that you feel, you know, books like The Power of Now, The Four Agreements, Lynn Grabhorn, you know, they seem to be like a once in a decade kind of phenomena. Do you have anything on the cards that you feel is going to grab the world?
Well, I just finished working on a book called We Are the Luckiest, The Surprising Magic of a Sober Life by Laura McCowan. And that one it's a special one, and it's done really, really well. And she went through she's an alcoholic, or she doesn't like to use the word alcoholic, but alcoholism was her thing, is what she talks about, and how we all have things that prevent us from leading our biggest and best lives. So she writes about it in a way that even if alcohol isn't your thing, whatever your thing is, you can start to experience it differently and shift it so that your bigger life can come through. So that's a New World Library book that I'm really excited about. I just got Glennon Doyle's book Untamed that I just started reading, and that I've never read anything of hers, but I'm like, her reputation precedes her for sure. So I'm excited about that one. And then I'm back in the arena on my own book about the things I've learned about joy, fear, and resilience by inviting the world to skip. And I'm in a writing group about that meets weekly, and I've been writing every day again. So I'm excited about that.
You work with books, you want to write books, and you're constantly reading books, you know, outside of work as well. What do books mean to you?
I feel like they're catalysts. They're you know, like, they are sparks that can really change the trajectory of our lives. And not every book, and you're not going to get that in every one, but when you find one that does it, it's like they really, really make a profound and lasting difference in our lives.
Yeah, I agree with you. I mean, many is a night, you know, if I can't sleep, I pick up a book, whether it's one I've got to do a show on or whether it's one I want to read, and often have, you know, the most wonderful epiphanies and breakthroughs in thinking. you know, just shifting my perceptions about things. I can't imagine a world without them.
Yes, me neither.
Okay, so if anybody wants to ask Kim a question, I can either just unmute everybody. We don't normally do this. We say, write it in the chat window, and Sharon normally asks them, but she's not here today because she couldn't get in. So if anybody would like to ask a question, just put me in the chat window and I'll unmute you. And you can talk to Kim about books or skipping or anything you want. Most of them, of course, I think are friends of yours, so they might not have any questions because they know all the answers. Anybody? Anybody? I'm not seeing. No, I'm not seeing anything. It looks like nobody had. I'm just going to unmute everybody and then they can speak up. If it looks like I can't unmute all of them, ask to unmute. No, that's not working. It looks like the only one that I can unmute is Serena. For some reason, the other. Serena, do you have a question for Kim?
Don't feel put on the spot, Serena.
Well, let me say, I really don't have a question because I've been taking lots of notes as you were speaking, and I too have gone to the Glide Church.
Oh, good.
Many years ago, and so I feel that kind of a connection, and I've so enjoyed being reminded what it was like to be a child and skip, because I haven't in a long time, because I now have great grandchildren. but when we get off of this, I'm going to see if I remember how to do it.
Oh, good.
Yeah, I think I'll be doing the same as well. And Serena also runs a women's circle. She runs a Magdalene circle, Mary Magdalene circle.
Yeah, that's the Mary Magdalene path. I was at a women's circle where we started to get into that, and it's been coming up a lot for me. So I'm intrigued to learn more about that.
Yeah, well, we're in our third year.
Wow.
And,
Yeah.
and very dedicated group of ladies.
That's great.
Yeah, well, I think the circles are a wonderful thing. Well, if nobody has a question, I think we're just about done, unless there's anything more that you want to share, Kim. This is your opportunity.
Yeah,
About books or anything.
Yeah, I just hope, it's my hope that, skipping is not going to be everyone's thing, but there are things that bring us joy and that reconnect us with that childlike part of ourselves, and that part of us is still in there and wants our attention and energy. And when the world seems so heavy, it can feel like, oh, I shouldn't do that. And I feel like it's in these times we need it more than ever. So that's my hope, is that inner child will find a spark and get to have more of a presence in our day-to-day lives.
Yeah, and I think that inner child is what we all need to be nurturing right now in the current situation, because everything else is trying to suppress all the positivity and the hope that we're feeling or that we have, and bringing out that inner child. Well,
Yeah, and last night I was watching. Oh, I got a little. I was watching some coverage last night of the Black Lives Matter, and they were talking a lot about the theme of freedom and what freedom really means. And I feel like that's a big, important part of the conversation that's coming up from all of this. And really, that's that spirit, having the space and the feeling of safety, so that inner child can come out, is really what freedom's all about. And I'm hoping that everything that's going on is going to help shift that, so more people everywhere can experience that level of freedom.
Yeah, I think the little children, we look at the babies and we look at the 1-year-olds and maybe the 2-year-olds before they have the conditioning thrown at them and all of the you can'ts, that's freedom, what we see with them.
Yeah, indeed.
Okay, well, Kim Corbin, thank you. Thank you for joining us. Thank you for sharing your 10 best books. If there's anybody here who wants to know more about you, and most of the people already do, they can go to your website, which is iskip.com, and also to Kim's page on the No BS Spiritual Book Club website, where we've posted a few of her interviews, and I think the one with Lee Harris is there as well. And obviously we'll be posting this one in our video library probably in about a week's time.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Sandie.
Thank you, Kim. It's been a real pleasure.
Indeed. Skip on.
Till next time. Yes, skip on. Good one. Bye-bye.
Bye.